everybody. Welcome to the Talkin Yotes podcast. Here is your host, Jason Bird.
Welcome to Talkin Yotes. Today I got a very special guest on today, the Predator icon, Gary Roberson. How are we doing today, Gary?
I'm doing great. I don't know about all the kind words, but if it means somebody's been doing it a long time, icon. Well, I guess that's true. I am an icon. A little bit tougher to get up in the mornings, but after a few minutes of stretching around, I can go and hang with most everybody.
Perfect. So just so you can give our listeners a little bit more about yourself, you want to tell everybody, give a little introduction about yourself?
Well, I'm Gary Roberson, and of course I've been in the hunting business since 1991 when I bought out Vernon Brothers Game Calls. But before that, I was, of course, born and raised on a ranch in South Texas. And of course, people argue about where South Texas is, but it's generally, most people agree, it's that area between San Antonio and Laredo. Uh, and if you get further south than that, going back toward Brownsville, we refer to that as the Valley. As you know, Texas is a big state. Some people call South Texas the brush country, but we farmed and ranched there. And my dad was not a hunter, but I had an older brother that was a year older than me, and he did about everything he could to make it easy for us to hunt, and he wanted us to stay on the ranch. He thought if as long as we were on the ranch, we weren't going to get in much trouble, and he was probably right. So we started hunting, small game, and as early as 5 and 6 years old, carrying 22 single shot rifles. I killed my first whitetail when I was hunting by myself at age 7. And Deb and I raised 3 sons, and we started them real early, but I didn't turn mine loose with the high-powered rifle at age 7. But Dad would take us out and put us, in a blind, or in my case, always like to sit in a tree. And of course, the weapon of choice in those days, in the early 60s, was Winchester Model 94 30-30 and iron sights, and that's what I used. Like I say, killed my first whitetail at 7, and then got into the predator calling at about age 10, simply because I love the hunting game. I love being outdoors, and I started reading everything I could get my hands on about hunting and especially predator hunting. I kind of fell in love with that because it was something, in Texas we could do year round. There were no seasons, no bag limits, and a lot of guys, of course, were hunting after dark in those days, we just used lights, and in fact, just flashlights, nothing, no fancy rigs. I think my first night hunting rig was a single shot 22 with iron sights, and so we weren't going to kill anything out there very far, but that's okay. Most of the critters we were calling up were raccoons anyway. I don't ever remember calling up a coyote after dark in the early days, probably because they got in on us and out without us even knowing they were there. But like I say, in those days, I read everything I could get my hands on about predator calling, and there was no doubt the pioneers of predator calling were Winston and Murray Burnham. You couldn't pick up one of the big 3 magazines, which were Outdoor Life, Field and Stream, or Sports and Field, without finding an article about the Burnham brothers. They were even written up in Ford Times. They were so popular, they were on TV, Roy Rogers' TV show, went all over the world, Africa and everything, using their hand predator calls to call up every kind of critter you can imagine in Africa. so their adventures are just something that I fell in love with, and grew up, like I said, continued to hunt, continued varmint hunt through high school, college. Of course, we deer hunted as well. Didn't get into the turkey hunting much till I moved to this part of the world in 1985, but uh, we were really fortunate uh, to hunt with a lot of neat guys through the years. I was able to hunt with Murray Burnham back I think we started hunting together in 1980. It was 86 or 87. And then when he sold his company out in 1991, I bought out Burnham Brothers. At that time, I was president of the bank here in Menard, Texas. And I stayed at the bank for another 6 months or so after buying out Burnham Brothers. And then I realized that I couldn't do justice to both companies or businesses. So I had to make a career choice. And to me, that was a pretty easy one. I decided I'd rather chase four-legged coyotes than two-legged ones. And so I left the banking business and cranked up with Burnham Brothers. I was fortunate enough back in 1992 to actually in 91, I did some hunting with Bruce Brady. He was a big turkey hunter, and he was a field editor for Outdoor Life and Field and Stream, and had really strong ties to Mossy Oak Camo. And Mossy Oak was just getting off the ground. They started in 1986, and I got to know those guys really well. So that was my really first connections to one of the outdoor companies was Mossy Oak. And so in 1992, they put me on their pro staff because, there weren't any predator guys out there to speak of beside Gerald Stewart and myself. Murray was pretty much gone. And of course, Gerald Stewart was gone. And that was pretty much it. It was a good old boys game at that time. And actually, it was pretty nice. So with that relationship with Mossy Oak, then we started doing some outfitting just to supplement the call industry a little bit. And we were doing elk hunts in New Mexico with a good buddy of mine, Phil Line, from down in South Texas. And then we were doing some mule deer hunts and also in the same country, doing a lot of whitetail hunts in South Texas and up through the hill country here in Texas. And then we did some turkey hunts. And that's, of course, where Mossy Oak got really involved. But then we did predator hunts. We outfitted for those and would have guys come in from all over the country. And it was at SHOT Show one year when I ran into or met Kevin Howard, who had really strong connections with Browning and Winchester, and of course, Winchester ammunition. And Kevin was big buddies with the guys at Mossy Oak. So with that relationship, we started growing, and we started doing what we called the Texas Shootout. And we would organize it every year at SHOT Show. We would decide what top riders from around the U.S. we were going to invite. We only invited riders that were from the big three magazines. And we did what we called co-op hunts. Burnham Brothers would furnish the game calls. Winchester might furnish the rifles on a hunt. Winchester ammunition, of course, furnished the BBs. And Mossy Oak would always furnish the camo clothing. And then we'd have an optics company, whether it was one year, I know we had Pentax, and then we had, I think, Loophole a couple of times. And then I think a little bit later on, we had, oh, golly, I think Trigicon came in late, but we always had a co-op hunt. And in that way, we could split the expenses of bringing in the top riders from around the country. And it didn't break everybody because we had to furnish them a hunting license. We had to furnish them the weapons we wanted them to use, so that hopefully we got ink on it, furnish them the ammo, calls, everything they want, clothing. And then, of course, we had to, feed and house them for a few days. And then I'd have to bring in guides to help to help, get them out in the field and teach them a little something about calling predators. Uh, I really think that is kind of what helped launch predator hunting. Predator calling was pretty popular when I started in the early 60s, when Murray and Winston were really rolling and getting TV time and a lot of magazine time, a lot of print media. But then we hit a period there I want to say in the 80s and early 90s, when up to mid 90s, even, when it got pretty tough. There weren't that many guys that were playing the game. But I think when we started getting a lot of ink in the magazines from that Texas shootout hunt, I think that helped. Probably the biggest launch for predator hunting occurred in about 1995. That was, I say 95, it might have been 96. We were doing the the Texas shootout, and we'd done it a couple of years, and Mossy Oak had always been involved. And at that time, Mossy Oak was doing several titles. They were doing a deer hunting video, how to. They were doing a how to on waterfowl, and of course, their big one was their turkey hunting video, how to. And they did one of those, a series of those, one every year, one on turkeys, one on deer, and one on waterfowl. So after we'd done the Texas shootout for a couple of years, I went to Ronnie Strickland and Toxie Hayes, and I said, "Hey guys, I think it's time we did a how-to predator calling video." And Toxie didn't say much, but I do remember because Cuz and I were close, still are. And Cuz said, "Well, we need at least an hour of really good footage in order to produce a predator calling video." And then, man, I don't know if we can get that. How long do you think we'll spend in the field to get an hour of kind of quality predator calling? And I said, "Well, we're doing that Texas shootout here in a couple of weeks." I said, "Why don't y'all send me a camera, man, and let's just see what happens." Typically, those hunts were like a day and a half long. Excuse me, 2.5 days long. If the weather interfered, which it generally did, they might roll back to 2 days. But anyway, I remember that year they sent me Mighty Joe White as my cameraman. Joe was from Missouri, great young guy, and we hit it off well. And we made 18 calls on that hunt in the daylight, and we didn't worry about videoing at night. But we had coyotes or cats or both on 16 out of the 18 calls. So after the hunt's over, I said, Joe White goes back to Mississippi. And then a few days later, I called Cuz and I said, "Hey, Cuz, what do you think? Do we have enough video to put together a how-to tape?" He said, "Yeah," he said, "we do. There's no doubt about it. By the time we, get a little off camera, stuff of you of using calls, demonstrating various things," he said, "we'll have over an hour." He said, "But do you think anybody will buy this product?" I said, "I really do. Let's just see what happens." So I convinced him to give me a try. And that title, we called it Eyes Front. And we called it Eyes Front because that's one of the basic characteristics of a predator. The eyes are set in the front of their skull. So by a system of triangulation, they can judge distance. If we're prey animals, our eyes are set in the side of our heads, and that's simply for defensive vision. Anyway, so we called that series Eyes Front. The Eyes Front video, and it was videotape in those days, outsold the other three substantially the very first year. So when returns on the sales got back, Cuz was on the phone. "Do you think we'll be able to produce another one of the Eyes Front videos this year?" So we did. We did 5 of those for Mossy Oak. And I think that did more to launch predator hunting in the modern times than anything else. primarily because it grew it in Texas because it was already popular here somewhat. Where it really grew the sport was back in the East and Southeast. As a young guy, I thought all the hunters were from Texas. You know, everybody down here hunted, I thought, because all of my friends did. But when I started going to the Southeast, I found out those rednecks know something about hunting. Every one of them hunted. I mean, they hunted deer, they hunted turkeys, and they were all starving for another excuse to go to the woods. Now, there weren't a lot of predators in some of those states in the 90s, but thanks to stalking efforts from Texas, they were, of course, moving coyotes to put in, pens over there so that they could chase them with their hounds. And then it's pretty easy to keep a fox in captivity, but a coyote, he's pretty good at digging, and a lot of them escape. And I always joke with the guys in Florida, said, yeah, we stocked your state with those guys in Georgia as well, because trappers that I knew were hauling them over there, and that's what they were using them in pens. So as the predator numbers, of course, increased there's just more demand. It just grew the market. But those years, those 5 seasons that we did ice front, I think did a lot for the sport. And since then, of course, we haven't slowed down much. We kind of phased out of the how-to videos because TV was becoming more popular, and so folks were watching TV watching TV more than they were, buying videos or DVDs. So the last DVD that we did was one called Catastrophic, and it was all daytime bobcat calling, and we sold 18,000 copies of that DVD. That was the largest, to my knowledge, the largest selling predator hunting DVD ever, or videotape. People just love to watch cats, especially cats in daylight. So that one took off really well for us. After we did that project in 2010, I'd moved over and I was shooting for Savage Arms. I had helped them to develop the Model 10 Predator Hunter. Some of you remember the rifle. It was off the Model 110, and I went to the factory, and of course Ron Coburn was president of Savage Arms at that time, and he and I were big buddies. And I told him it's time we built a rifle specific for the predator calling game. So he said, I'm flying you to the factory, and we're going to look through the factory, and you come up with components that you think we need to build this rifle. So I did. We went through and we picked stocks, and we picked actions and triggers and all that kind of fun stuff, and had various meetings with some of the engineers. And so after the day was about over, we met at Ron Coburn's office, and he said, well, I see what you've done here, and I understand it. And he said, I think it's a good idea. But he said, what's going to set this product apart from just another gun on my shelf? And I said, Ron, we're going to camo it from one end to the other. And that's what we did. We camoed the stock, the barrel, and we used mossy oak brush pattern on it, and which I really loved. And that took off. We sold a lot of Savage Model 10 Predator Hunters. At the same time, let's see, our optics company, we jumped around in a little bit there. Golly, we worked on I need a little break here. Who was not Vortex? The John Allen and John LeCourt were big with Nikon optics, and Nikon was huge in the sport hunting optics there for a while. Of course, their optics were, their products were made in Japan, most of them, but they were good. They're good quality. And when we came out with the Savage Model 10 Predator Hunter, Uh, that was about the time that John Allen and I were on a hunt together. And he said, what do you think if we go together and develop an optic or a rifle scope specifically for the predator calling game? And I said, I think it's a great idea. I said, but your optics are already good. I'm not sure how we can tweak them other than one of the keys to being a good predator caller or killer is to be able to get quick target acquisition. And so I said, about the only thing I think we can do is maybe design a reticle for that. And John agreed, and we came up with the idea. And many of you probably still have those scopes. We call them the Coyote Special. It had the regular crosshairs in it, but right in the center, it was an open circle, and I think it was like 4 inches at 100 yards. But what we found out is the eye naturally goes to the center of that circle. So you didn't even look for the crosshair. You just found your target, and your eye would go to the center of that circle, and wherever that circle was or wherever your eye was looking, that was your target. So it was quick target acquisition, and Nikon sold a lot of those scopes. Things rocked along really good. Like I say, in 2010, that's when we came. We were, of course, being sponsored by Nikon. We were being sponsored by Savage and Mossy Oak. And TV was the thing at that time. I never wanted to do TV. I believe it or not, I'm a pretty personal kind of guy. Like living out in the country. I love my neighbors, but I don't like big cities much, and I don't like a lot of attention. And I was afraid that if you did TV, that might happen, those things might come along. And anyway, I just kind of avoided it as long as I could. But those three companies came to me and said, look, it's time that we do a TV show. And so that's what we did. And I said, well, the only way I'll do it is if Mossy Oak was sponsoring several shows at that time. And I said, if Mossy Oak, y'all would kind of take the lead and lead me, because I didn't really want to step out there and do it. And they said, oh, well, we'll do that. Don't worry. So we did. And of course, I used my cameraman. Of course, my youngest son, Steve, is the one that's in the field with me all the time. And also a lifelong buddy by the name of Brian Hawkins. Brian does a lot of our camera work. He's our producer. Brian's one of the most talented, if not the most talented guy in the industry. He makes me look good. Of course, Steve has to work real hard to make me look good in the field nowadays. But Brian is the only guy that's ever won 3 Emmy awards for just TV, not outdoor programming. So if you watch Carnivore, that's what we decided to name the TV show. You'll know we notice that we try to tell a story with every show. It's not just, hey, Bubba and I are hunting today. We like to build a story around somewhere or something or whoever we're hunting with. I don't want that attention on me. So that seems to be a good formula for us. It's worked well for 10 years. In the 10 years that we have, where we've aired for 14, we're in our 14th season now, but we've been, of the most viewed shows, we've been right at the top on the Pursuit channel. And we started with Pursuit and love Pursuit. And we've been with them ever since. So not everybody knows this, but we're shooting season 15 right now. And this will be my last. I turned 72 in March, and I can still go and do, and I'm going to continue to go and do. I'm going to hunt as hard as I ever did till I can't. But I'm not going to do the TV show. We'll do stuff for YouTube or some other, ways of getting it out. But right now a little tired of television. But well, thank our good sponsors at Ruger. Ruger's our firearm sponsor this day and time and has been for years. Uh, Trigicon Optics, of course, one of our sponsors and have been for the last 5 or 6 years. Hornady, of course, has come on board, and who doesn't love Hornady ammunition? Those are just great companies. And if, of course, Mossy Oak is still one of our sponsors. And we've been so blessed. If you were to give most anybody their picks of who they would want to be sponsored by, it would be those companies. To me, they're at the top in whatever they do. Ruger is at the top of the firearms, especially on the rifle side. And of course, their handguns are great as well, which I kind of like the handgun stuff. Trigicon, nothing's tougher than Trigicon. Great products, great people, and Hornady, like I say, how do you beat Hornady? So we've been really blessed to be teamed up with those folks for a long time.
Well,
do you have any questions?
that was all awesome information. It's unfortunate to hear that season 15 is going to be the last one. I know we've talked a little bit outside of our podcast here. I've watched that Carnivore TV and since I can remember, and it's always awesome watching it and learned a lot of good stuff from you over the years. Hey everybody, just taking a quick second away from the podcast here to talk about our partnership with Freaks Game Calls. They're the first ultrasonic game call on the market. The sound quality of these things are absolutely outstanding. The sound is nothing that we've ever heard before. We've called in tons of coyotes, quite a few bobcats, and we've seen some pretty wild stuff calling them in with this Freaks Call. Make sure you go check out their website at freakscalls.com. Follow them on their Facebook and their YouTube. Subscribe to them on there, and we'll get back to the podcast.
Well, that's what, like I say, we try to entertain, but with telling the story, but we also try to educate. Having done it for as long as I have, and it wasn't, you could go out, and call for 60 years and everybody's going to learn something, but probably the greatest teacher that I had was not Murray Burnham. Although Murray was a great teacher, Murray was more like me. He wouldn't tell you anything unless you ask him. Mm-hmm. He would answer, but the best teacher that I ever went to the woods with was you're not going to believe it, an equine dentist by the name of Larry Sims from Oklahoma. Larry and I can't tell you how many days a year we hunted together, but what separated Larry from everybody else is not only did he hunt coyotes like they owed him money, after every stand that we made and a coyote came up, whether we got the coyote killed or not, we analyzed what happened. Why did that coyote react the way he did? And that conversation would go on until the next call we made. And I think that is what made me the best student of the game that I could possibly be, was that analyzing every situation that we encountered. And, we've been doing it a while and we haven't seen everything. A lot of people, I'll be doing seminars this weekend in Houston at the Texas Trophy Hunter shows. And everybody wants you to say, black and white when they ask the question. They want a one simple answer. Well, I've learned, by playing this game for a long time, that there's not always a real simple black and white answer. These animals that we're calling are like people. They're all individuals. Some are going to react differently to stimuli than others. Now, we can tell you what most of them will do, and that's what I'm going to be prepared. That's the way I'm going to be prepared to handle the situation. But every one of them is a little different. And I think that's what makes it so challenging and so fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Obviously, you mentioned you're sponsored by a handful of companies. What's your current setup that you're running to knock down the predators? Hey, everybody, just wanted to take a quick minute to tell you about our partnership that we have with Vika. They're a premium clothing line designed by outdoor enthusiasts who are passionate about hunting and the outdoors. If you have any questions on them, don't hesitate to reach out to us directly on our page or check them out on their website at vika.com. Now, back to the podcast.
Uh, right now, I'm still using my old pets. The OEM 77 Hawkeye. I love it, and I shoot it 223. It's stainless. I've got a 3 to 9 by 40 AccuPoint, Trijicon AccuPoint on it, and I'm shooting the Hornady Super 53 grain Super Performance ammo. And in South Texas, those coyotes are not big. They don't have a big. It's so warm down there. Some winters we don't even have a frost. So those coyotes aren't big. No heavy hair coat. That is all the gun I need, and it's tight shooting. I mean, down there, if I can see 50 yards, we're lucky. I'd probably be better off shooting with a shotgun, except I'm not a shotgunner.
Yeah.
So uh, that's kind of my pet down there. Now, when I, of course, go to the Panhandle in West Texas and New Mexico, Arizona, wherever, Colorado, we have visibility. We can see a coyote coming from 800 yards or further, and uh, typically in those I have been shooting a 22 250, just a Ruger American, and with the same optic on it, the 3x9 by 40 AccuPoint, and I'm shooting a 155 grain VMAX in it. But I'll tell you what, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and I will admit I fight change a lot, but Silencer Central sent me a suppressor here a few months ago, and I never shot suppressed because if a coyote hears a click if I dry fire on him, he's turning wrong side out, and but I've decided I wanted to shoot, give it a try, and I didn't want to put it on any of my guns because most of my guns that I shoot are 22-inch barrels, and then you put a suppressor on the end of that, it makes it where it handles like a crowbar. And I'm all into not destroying the ergonomics of a firearm because I shoot so much tight cover. That's where I was raised, and I like a gun to be agile. I like to be able to take a running shot, and if you make that gun too where it's unwielding, it makes it difficult to try to pull that stuff off. So Ruger, of course, came with the Ruger American Gen 2, and I know a lot of you guys are shooting them, and I love it. It's a great improvement over the original American. I love a lot of the features. I like the sexy fluted barrel. I like the improvement in the stock. I think the trigger's better. I like the overall finish of the gun better, and the action is smoother. Anyway, so I decided I would just get me one of. They don't make it left-handed yet. That's one thing I've been raising Cain with Ruger about. So I'm having to shoot this right-handed gun, but I said, okay, if I'm going to have to put a suppressor on a rifle, I want the shortest barrel I can get. Well, that's the Ruger American Gen 2, the little ranch rifle. It comes with a 16.1-inch barrel. And when I got that gun in, I was like, man, that thing is short. But when I put the suppressor on it, it's just really about right. It's back to about 22 inches. And the weight of the suppressor is not much. It handles good. Since I was getting a new rifle, I decided, well, why not get a new caliber, something I don't have, just to try it, because I've been reading quite a bit about these 22 arcs and talking to buddies that had them, and they just love the way they kill coyotes. And anyway, so that's what I got. And I'll tell you what, folks, when I put it on paper, I have never shot a more accurate firearm than this rifle. Uh, what's maybe more cool, if there's anything in the world more cool than accuracy, it may be that I can see bullet impact. And I feel it recalls no more, maybe less than my 223. And I'm shooting Hornady's 70 grain CX bullet in it. Uh, I can't wait. I've shot it on paper, but I haven't had it in the field yet. And I take that back. I've killed 2 coyotes with it, and in West Texas the other day. I lied to you. I got 2 out of 2. Uh, it pelt damage was more than than you would, of course, but you would expect that. Going from say a 55 grain 22 250 bullet up to the 70 grain CX bullet. Uh, I expected more. We're going to get more exits. That's the cool thing about the 223 and the 22 250. I really liked it. I rarely got an exit. I liked it that bullet expended all of its energy in the body cavity. And when that happened, I thought I got really clean kills. But I will say, what I've seen so far, we're not going to lose any coyotes with this 22 ARC. I've let several buddies, well, Steve shot it, and then the guys that were on the hunt with me the other day shot it, and they were very much impressed as well. So maybe it wasn't just me. So now if I can get them to make it in a left-hander, everything's great. Also, one thing that I want them to change is, and they promised me they would, I'm not big on high capacity magazines, and this one comes with a 10-round mag, which is not high capacity, but I like a flush mount mag, and that way to me it's just easier to carry. So I've kind of asked Ruger, when we could get those, and they told me this fall. So hopefully this fall, maybe they'll make some left-handers, and maybe they'll make some flush mount mags, and let's hope that they build a few left-handed ones, because if they do, you're going to see an old dog with a different weapon in the woods. That's what I'm going to. I love that caliber.
So you're saying maybe a season 16 and 17 then?
Well, you'll be able to see me, but there's going to have to be a lot of things change before I would commit to going back to TV. There just comes a time when you just need to step aside. There's too many good young guys out there, and let somebody else have it.
So obviously, at this point, everyone should know who you are. Predator hunting, you've obviously got into it a handful of years ago. Is coyotes mainly your big go-to, or do you go after other predators? Hey everybody, just taking a quick second away from the podcast here to talk about our partnership that we have with 365 Thermal. They are an authorized thermal dealer. They carry all the big name brands such as Pulsar, AGM, Rix, iRay, Knockpix, Fox Pro, 2Vets, and Sniper Hog lights. Go ahead and check them out on their Facebook page at 365 Thermal and their website at 365thermal.shop. They also have a Facebook group called 365 Thermal Group. Wade's a great guy to work with over there. Tell him that we sent him your way. Check out our discount code for 365 Thermal as well. It's down in the description. Now back to the podcast.
Coyotes are that's my goat. That's my favorite. I call up a lot of bobcats because we're in country where we have cats. And we'll call up an occasional mountain lion, but we don't have many line here. We don't in Texas where I am. I'm in the central part of the state. We need to go west or south to find those. But that's my favorite. Now I do, we've done quite a bit with hounds. I love hounds, especially on line and bobcat. Great game, some of the prettiest country a guy can hunt is lion country. Unfortunately, when you get after a lion, he's going to go to the worst possible place in the world. And at my age, 72, raised it. Of course, I'm living at 2,000 feet elevation, and I'm if go chase a lion, and I'm generally hunting at 8,000. That air gets a little thin up there, and I and that old terrain is steep. It's tough, and the best time, of course, to go is when there's snow on the ground, and that makes it more difficult to get around. And I'm a dry land guy. I don't like to fight the snow that much. So I don't know. We're kind of slowing down on the lion stuff, but I don't know that I'll ever stop calling coyotes as long as I'm able to get out of the pickup and walk out there and make a call.
Heck
I'm
yeah.
going to continue to do it.
Absolutely. So, do you remember the first coyote that you ever shot?
I do. I was 10 to 11 years old. I don't remember exactly, but I was on the west part of our ranch, which is the thickest cover. And in those days, the brush probably wasn't as thick as it is now. It seems like brush is really encroached over a lot of South Texas. But I was calling using a hand call. And the first call I had was, I hate to say it, wasn't a Burnham Brothers. It was a herder's game call. Uh, when I went to order a call, my dad said, "Son, you're wasting your money." The Burnham call I wanted was the old Fox long range Fox call, and it was $3.50. Well, in the herder's catalog, they had one for $3. He said, "Save yourself that 50 cents and just get that other call, because that doesn't work, son." He said, "The only way to hunt is you get in the woods, you be still, and you be quiet and hope something comes by you." Anyway, so much for that. But that's the call I was using, was a herder's game call, and I shot a coyote with a 22 rimfire single shot. I called him up, and I was just calling on a Sendera, but he happened to step out about 20 yards into the opening, and I got the shot, hit the coyote, and I excuse me, I know I killed him, but I did not recover that coyote. But that wasn't the first critter I'd called up, but that was the first coyote I called up. And I was already sold on the game. The very first time I sat down with a predator call was a couple of months before that. And after dark, and my brother and I were calling, and I called up a gray fox, and that was the first gray fox I'd seen on our ranch ever. And so from that time forward, predator calling was magic to me. And so I was hooked, to say the least. But after that, of course, I found out there were more gray fox there than what I thought. We called up more gray fox than we did coyotes, and like I say, simply because we I don't think we had to be as good at the game in those days, because in the early '60s, no one else was doing it. So I don't think the coyotes were as educated. That's why we could get one rolling close enough, to shoot him with a 22 rimfire. I wasn't using much. I didn't have any camo. I remember, we wore blue jeans, and I'd wear a tan shirt or a brown shirt, and I knew to sit in the shadows, but that was about it. I never knew, when I sat down to make a call, I didn't know where the wind was blowing. I learned, but that wasn't anything that entered my mind. I just tried to get where I could see around me.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you say the what got you into it was just getting that first call, or was there something specific that got you really big into the predator calling?
Well, I think, reading all I had read about the Burnham Brothers and all their success and the stories. And then, of course, John Wooders was a good friend of mine later on. And John was a great writer, and he was also big friends with the Burnham Brothers. And so I'd visit with John, and between it, they just kind of all whipped me into a frenzy.
I got you.
And, so yeah, reading about it and seeing it, occasionally on TV was great. Like, they had the Lone Star Sportsman here in Texas, and they did some predator calling on it from time to time. But you're right, getting out there the first time and calling up a fox or having success, that's what feeds that desire to go again.
Yeah. So going off subject a little bit here, but still staying on the whole predator side of things. The Freaks game call. What part do you have in that? I know that's you
Whew.
kind of just put me onto them. I remember, watching carnivore TV, and then there was, I think, an episode or right after that there was the big. I shouldn't say big, but it was a little spot for the Freaks game calls, and I know I've talked to you and I've talked to Randy as well about it. I saw that first time that you were sitting out in looked like some prairie grass, and you had that mountain lion come wandering up to that call, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, I need to figure out how to get me one of them.
Well, that was there's never been footage of a lion that, to my knowledge, or that I've ever seen, called in with a predator call, especially on an open prairie like that. Uh, we'll probably never see footage like that again, ever. And we were lucky. We just sat down in the right spot. There's a whole story with that. How she heard me, I'll never know, because I was calling dead away from her. And there was a crosswind, and I know where she came from because there was a little snow, and we tracked her back. She came out of some low hills about a half a mile away from us, and that's amazing that she was able to hear us, because, like I say, we were calling dead north. She came out of dead south, and their hearing is just incredible. Not only that, but the coyotes as well. People they just don't realize how far these critters can hear us. Uh, but I got on. No one else thought about ultrasonics, you know, forever. Uh, I started wanting to build an electronic game call that would produce ultrasonics in the 1990s, when I had observed coyotes in the field, and I could tell they were communicating with each other, like dogs, they turn their head and all when they're looking at each other, and when we're talking to them. And yet there was no sound. They were close enough to me. If they were making sounds, I could hear them. And then I had a situation where was similar with bobcats, and I could tell they were communicating, yet there was no sound. And so I started doing a little research, and that's when I found that when we were young, we could hear to about 20,000 hertz. You measure sound two ways, and how loud it is in decibels, and then in what frequency it is, and you measure that in hertz. Well, when we were young, we could hear to, say, 20,000 hertz. Well, when I got to reading what canines can hear, they hear to 45,000 hertz, and felines can hear to 64,000 hertz. That's when I was going, wait a minute, that's why I can't hear anything that those animals are saying. They're communicating at a frequency above what the human can hear. So that's when I started trying to find speakers that would produce ultrasonic frequencies, those sounds that occur naturally. And those speakers were not available. It wasn't until 6 to 7 years ago that I found some. And once I found that technology was available, that's when we started working on the Freak. So over probably 6 years ago now. And a lot of people don't know that because we didn't have a product available, but we were working on it. And once we got an ultrasonic speaker, I thought all I had to do was play the sounds that we had recorded through the years through those speakers, and they would suddenly be ultrasonic. Well, of course, that wasn't the case. We had to record sounds with speakers that would record ultrasonics. So here we go. Then we found that you can't replicate all of the animal sound with one speaker. It takes two speakers. So we had to build a speaker just to replicate the low end frequencies, and one that replicates the upper end frequencies. And then they have to work together. So the software had to be developed for that. So it was a bigger job than we thought, but no one scared. No one, everybody thought I was a nut. I think for a while, I've heard people say there's nothing to the ultrasonics, but that's not true. They do travel through the air just fine. All you have to do is, all my life, there were silent dog whistles, and all we hear is the air going through that whistle. And you can Google it. They say a dog can hear it 500 yards. They say if conditions are good, the dog may hear it at 2 miles. So we do know ultrasonics travel through the air. That's that, that's no doubt about that. So anyway, we built the product, and the first one we brought here, I thought may have been one of the best acid tests we ever performed on that call. And we had an old dachshund female here by the name of Dash. Dash was over 10 years old. She had heard every sound in the world, as you could imagine, in this office building. And any hand call, any recording, she would lay in her bed, and that was it. She would completely ignore you. The very first ultrasonic recording we had was of a baby cottontail. And when we played that sound in this office, old Dash came out of her bed and tried to eat the speaker. And I told my wife, I said, now we're on to something different. This is a different animal. We're making realistic sounds now. And it was proven the very first time I carried a prototype into the field. About the second or third call we made that morning, we were up close to Big Spring, Texas. I had been calling with a recording of a grown cottontail, and I switched, and nothing came in. I didn't see a cat or coyote coming. So a lot of times I'll switch and go to the baby cottontail just to give me a little different sound, a little busier sound, a little higher frequency sound. When I switched that baby cottontail, it was early spring. A mama cottontail ran across a road, and I saw her running for about 30 yards and parked herself right in front of the call. And she stayed there until I picked the call up. And there's no doubt in my mind what attracted her. It was the sound of a baby cottontail. Early spring, she had most likely had little ones close to where the call was. And she was coming to protect those little ones. Well, in all my years of calling, I had never called a cottontail before, ever. Now, I had called a jackrabbit one time in South Texas using a call that sounds something kind of like a jackrabbit distress. There was a jackrabbit out about 75 yards, and I went to using that hand call called the Black Magic that we make. And that jackrabbit came running straight at me and stopped about 10 steps short. And when she sat down, I could see her underline. I could see she was nursing. And I said, her little ones are right here somewhere. Mama is coming to protect those babies. Since then, we've called up a number of jackrabbits. You may have seen it on some of the episodes of Freak, but I have not called up another cottontail, but I've called up numerous jackrabbits, and it's pretty hilarious. They'll run kind of like they're going to attack the call, and then they'll cripple off like they're hurt and go off 30, 40 yards, and then they'll come back to it if nothing chases them, and they'll cripple off again. It's just the realism of the sound. And that's what we're seeing. We're predators. You saw the mountain lion. She's all over the call. She actually gets my scent off the call, curls up her lips, and snarls, but she won't leave it. She goes and even swats the call over. Then we've had, of course, coyotes run over it. We have had javelinas hit the call on numerous occasions. One even, it hooked the call on its tusk and ran off with it for about 10 yards before it came loose. And then we've had numerous gray fox fight the call till we turned it off. You may remember the episode on Carnivore where we had a pair of foxes come in, and they fought the freak for 8.5 minutes until they flipped it so many times they hit the kill switch and turned it off. But they drug it around in a gravel pit. That doesn't happen unless you're making a truly realistic sound. And the sounds that we're making with the freak are as close to being realistic as you can make with an electronic call and speakers.
Yeah, I say just from personal experience with this call, I've ran a handful of different ones, and I've seen so much stuff up here in Iowa that any other call that I've used, it doesn't even compare. I mean, I've never had a coyote. Well, obviously, most coyotes will try to sneak downwind from you, and I had one. I ranged him out, and he was right about 800 yards away. Went completely around me, all the way across the gravel road, all the way out in front of me, downwind of me. Stopped at 800 yards and heard one of the cottontail sounds that I was running. I believe it was Struggle Bunny. I was running that, and straight downwind from me, and it came barreling right to me. I mean, any other call that I've used, and as soon as they get downwind from me, I've had them just gone. But I
Yeah, we've had a couple occasions where they got wind off of us or the call, and we were able to call them back, generally by going to the hurt pup sounds or the super pup. But, you know, I always set up, though, you'll have the situation where you'll have one that you can get away with that. But don't think you can live by that, partner.
no
It's
no
not
no
going to happen. Those are rare.
yes yes
But, a lot of, here's the thing that I was doing seminars in Midland here a couple of months ago, and we got a lot of guys out there in West Texas are game callers, especially they do a lot of the night hunting, especially they do the big bobcat contest, and they had a lot of really cool questions, and finally one of the young guys said, "Well, if I buy this, will this make me a really great predator caller?" I said, "No, it's not. If just because you own the freak, it's not going to make you a better game caller. Now, it's going to give you the ability to make better sound, but you're still going to have to play the wind, play the sun, do all those things that give you the advantages, and that's from experience."
Yep.
So I tell guys that all the time, because that's one of the questions I'll get asked this weekend in Houston. Well, if I buy this, will I be a great predator caller? Well, probably not. I hope it doesn't cost me the sale though. But I've got to be honest.
Yeah,
It's just, there's no, there's no thing, nothing out there like experience.
yeah, I 100% agree with that. Yeah, saying that night that I saw that, as soon as I saw that, I was 100% sold on it, because I watched this coyote come up here in Iowa. We just have a lot of cornfields and beans.
Oh yeah, I know it well.
Yeah. So a lot of
Very productive country.
yes, yes, big open fields, and I was actually out behind my parents' house. They've got a big alfalfa patch, and then it goes into CRP, corn and bean fields all around it. And initially heard it calling into the CRP and didn't get eyes on it. I watched it hit the gravel to my east, and it completely full circle around me to get my downwind. And I had a perfect, or had a setup that was pretty much perfect. And yeah, like I said, it circled completely around me and came right in, and I ended up getting him down. But I just one of those things that any other call I've used, I've never had that. It would have got my downwind and it'd have been gone.
Yes, sir. And if I'd have been with you, he'd have been gone. We wouldn't have had that good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned that West Texas Big Bobcat tournament. Or have you done quite a few tournaments in your day, or are you mainly?
I don't. I used when I was younger, I did, but those are 24-hour hunts.
Yep.
And most of the guys really concentrate on the night hunting. And like I'm 72. I don't hunt 24 hours.
Yep.
I'll hunt I'll hunt all day in the daylight as long as the weather's good. Just take a snack and keep going. But when it gets dark, I'm ready to lay down. And and we carry a camera all the time when we're hunting. And the in the night footage is great if you've got good lighting. But what people really like to see, they like to see that daytime stuff.
Oh yeah.
And it's what's really crazy, they really like to see that daytime bobcat stuff. There's something about a magic to so many guys about seeing that bobcat. And one of my old buddies used to call him poor man's lion. Everybody wanted to kill a bobcat because they'll never be able to afford to kill a lion. And I'm right in that category. Of course, I don't know that I ever want to shoot a lion nowadays, but there may have been a time when I did want to. I just couldn't afford it.
Yep. Yep. So when you're out there running that freaks call, obviously, you got different sequences for each time of year. Is there a specific sequence that you yourself use to get a bunch of dogs down?
I call by the seat of my britches. I call by feel. Uh, what's happening in the field will dictate what I do. And now there's certain times of the year. I'm a guy that really likes to use prey sounds because most of the year that's what works. But, in the breeding season, we'll use more vocals. In the spring, we're going to use some way more canine distress sounds. But I love the prey stuff. And a lot of guys think, well, I don't want to use a jackrabbit because there's no jackrabbits where I live. They're just cottontail. But any kind of good distress sound will work, even if that animal is not present there. Heck, one of the recordings I use a lot is of me blowing the mini blaster, what my pet call. And the reason I use it on the freak is just to get the sound away from me. So it helps us to make video. I could be sitting here blowing it and not have to carry the call. But when that coyote or cat rolls in, he's looking right at me. I'd rather have him looking at the call out there. So I'll just play that recording, on the freak rather than and keep the attention off of me. Yeah, we've got a ton of rabbit recordings that I like. We've got some new bird recordings that I really like. I think that we call it yellow crested or something. It's actually the old yellowhammer woodpecker. Steve was able to get a recording of it here the other day. In fact, we got him to do two different type of distress sounds. And man, I'll tell you, on cats, that bird distress sound is a gold peck, I think is what we have it. There's two different sounds under that name. And if you've got a cat around, they'll get busy coming to that sound. They just like it. They like some of the baby cottontailies and all that stuff as well. But if I were to pick one sound for cats, that would be it right now.
I got you. So this is going to be a pretty vague question, and you can give me a couple different answers if you'd like. But what was your most memorable, best, favorite hunt that you've ever been on, that you were a part of?
Whew. Man, that's a tough one. I've probably forgotten the very best one. The morning that we called up the line and at 9 a.m, where a line shouldn't be at 9 a.m, and the video we were able to get and the amount of video we were able to get it's hard not to say that wasn't the best stand I ever made. We've had stands where we killed multiple coyotes and all that, and that were really great, and I loved them. But getting that line out there was so rare. And if I didn't have a permit, and had I had a permit, I would have killed her anyway. I knew it was I saw it was a big female, And after she did what she did, I was like, there was no way I could pull the trigger on her. She did everything we could ask of her to do, and she came a long way to get there. Uh, I did a little research, and she was, when I saw her coming in, and I didn't see her coming in from till I turned to look back at Steve, who was running my camera, and I saw her in a long trot. She was coming, and she was right about 10 steps behind him. And I hadn't had the call on for a couple of minutes, but she so had that sound pinpointed, she basically stepped around the call. And when she stepped around it, she went about 5 more steps and stopped and looks around because she knows that's where that sound should be. And when she can't see anything that's food, then she continues that exact same path going out into grass that's 6 inches tall. Yellow grass, there's absolutely no cover. I don't know how far she would have gone. I let her go about 30 yards, and I turned the call on. When I did, whoop, she swaps in and goes straight back to the freak. And, the rest is history. But she's going about 8 miles an hour, and I had been calling for about 15 minutes. And I've tried to calculate how far she may have traveled. And that's the amazing thing, is that she could hear me from the distance she came, and the wind was not helping her. It was a crosswind. So that footage that we were able to get of her it changed what people thought about the freak big time. I think people saw the way she reacted to the call, and of course, never seen a lion react to a call like that. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I can 100% agree on that. That was, like I said, I saw that on the Pursuit channel, and I was like, how can I get that? That is incredible footage.
But there's numerous coyotes, calling coyotes. Gosh, there's so many great stands that it's just hard to come up with one. I remember a hunt we did. A really good buddy of mine, Richard Hurt, Richard's from down in South Texas, and we were hunting down in South Texas right after deer season, so probably February. And we hunted 2.5 days, and we called up 58 coyotes and killed 46. We missed one coyote, and that was amazing hunt. And I know there's guys that could kill more, but that's all daytime, and we weren't getting a ton of calls in because you have to do cutaways. But it seemed like on that hunt we didn't worry if there was going to be a coyote coming. We were worried about how many and from which direction. They were just there.
That's insane. That is a lot. Is that how many? Was that just a day's worth, or was that a couple days?
No, that was 2.5 days.
Okay.
2.5 days, and we, like I say, we were probably making 15 calls a day. I think, but I don't think we had but a couple of stands that were dry. And then we had multiples on some, but it was just a stretch there where the coyote population was high, and if it was a time when they were hungry, and if they heard it, they came. They were just there, and our shooting was good. Both action rifles. I know we're just old timers, but that's what we grew up shooting and comfortable shooting, and when he shoots really well. You'll see it on Carnivore this season. We were calling in South Texas, and I had a couple of coyotes to go back to agility of a rifle. This, I think it was really well demonstrated on this stand that we were calling on a gravel pit. We're sitting on the west bank, and early into the call, I've got the freak out in the middle of the pit, and I see a pair of coyotes roll up on the south bank, and they stop upon a pile of gravel there. I could see the male was in front, and the female was right behind him. So I say, I had just had the call off for about 30 seconds. So I said, okay. As soon as I kick the freak back on, that male's going to roll off the bank, and I'm going to let him travel across this gravel pit because my buddy's sitting behind me, and he shoots well too. So my plan is let him roll out into that gravel pit for about 40 yards, and then I'm going to take the shot. I'm going to kill the female behind him. When I take the shot, it's going to even push the male further out into the opening. So we'll be able to get a shot at him leaving at least. So turn the call on, boom, the male rolls right off into the gravel pit to the freak. Everything's working great. And I'm watching him out of the corner of my eye, and I've got that female in the scope. When he gets out about 35, 40 yards, boom, I knock the female down behind him, and he goes the wrong way. Instead of him breaking away from me, he broke directly between me and the female. So now he's hauling it. Well, I'm shooting the bolt action, my 223. I throw another shell in, and I kill him running. And when we replayed the video, I killed both coyotes in less than 4 seconds. I was pretty proud of my shooting for 72 years old.
Really
but
good.
That goes back to being familiar with the rifle and having a gun that handles well and handles quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think my final question I got for you for tonight, and then I'll let you enjoy the rest of your night here. What is the best advice that you can give to someone that's wanting to get into predator hunting?
I would say probably the best advice I could give to someone is just get out there and do it. You're going to make mistakes, but if I sit down and I make a call and everything happens just as I had planned, I don't learn anything. It's when I get out there and I screw up, and I still do every day, that's when I learn something. And I think if there's one thing that really sets apart the good coyote callers from the guys that can blow a call or turn a call on and set up pretty well, is knowing when the moment of truth is about to happen. And I call that moment of truth that time when that coyote is going to give you the very best chance for you to kill him. It's generally when that coyote rolls up and stops, or I stop him, bark him to a stop. If I bark him, I better be on him because he's going to give me just usually a second. Boom, that's when you take him. But watching his body language, that will tell you when that moment of truth may be fixing to happen, and you better be on him, because once that moment of truth is passed, your chances of killing that coyote have gone to heck. You're going to have to probably have to take a shot at one running out. And I kill a few running, but I don't make a living doing it. So get out there and do it. I did write a book. It's called Eyes Front, and we released it a couple of years ago, that you can buy on our website on burningBrothers.com. And it's called Eyes Front. And I did put in there some chapters about calling turkeys, some of those experiences and how to, and some on rattling whitetails. I rattle up a lot of whitetails. So I put in a few chapters on that. But most of the whole book, 2/3 of it, is all about predator calling. And a lot of it is how to. And for some guy that would, there's, in this day and time, I don't know how many folks read anymore. They like to look at their phone. But for those guys that, don't mind picking up a book and maybe learning something, I think it's a pretty good learning tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, say that's definitely something that I'm going to be purchasing here very, very soon. Say I've keep looking at it and I'm like, I'm just going to grab it. I'm going to grab it. And yeah, after our conversation we've had tonight, I'm going to be purchasing that very, very soon. But is there anywhere that we can send all of our listeners to check you out online?
uh, as far as of course, you can go to Carnivore TV. We're on the Pursuit channel, and if you can't catch it on TV, you can download a free app, and the app is called Pursuit Up, PURSUITUP. And again, let me stress, it's free. And once you go get download that app, it's broken down. I think hunting, fishing, and maybe shooting or something. But just click on the hunting uh, side of it, and then the shows that are hunting shows on the channel are listed in alphabetical order. Go to Carnivore, click on that, and you can pick whatever episode you want to watch whenever you want to watch it. Uh, as far as freak calls, uh, folks interested in looking at the freak, go to freakcalls.com, and there's information on there about the freak. If you're interested in, Burnham Brothers calls, that's the old hand calls that we still make that Murray and Winston made back in the 60s, actually started in 1952. Just go to burnhambrothers.com, and you'll be able to find us one way or another. Uh, and if you go to any of the Trophy Hunter shows the next 3 weeks, I'll be at all of those. I'll be doing seminars on predator calling. Those have really been well received. This, of all the hunting shooting sports right now, predator calling is the fastest growing. There's more guys getting into this game than ever before, and for all the right reasons. Not only are we out there doing something we love, but we're out there controlling predators. I don't have anything against the coyote or bobcat or lion, but when we have problems when we have an overpopulation, and we can be tools to help with that overpopulation. Also, it's an inexpensive hunt compared to most. If you can get Joe Blow will let you hunt his farm, you can take any kind of a rifle out there and a hand call and get out there and squawk, and you're after them. So, but some of these guys, like in the big bobcat contest, they've got, expensive hunting rigs and all top drives and all sophisticated lighting systems and thermals and everything else. And it can be an expensive game, but it doesn't have to be. And it's a good one that you can get a start for almost nothing. You can get a taste for the game. Yeah. And if you like it, it can go downhill fast, can't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, it can. Yes, it can. Gets spendier and spendier, but it is worth every dime. Like I said, I grew up watching the Carnivore TV and growing up just watching all your content that you've put out over the years, and definitely you are one of the big people that's got me into this, and I cannot thank you enough for hopping on here tonight and letting me waste some of your time for the evening.
Well, thank you so much for having you, and we thank all the guys that are out there hunting, and especially thank all our folks in the military and first responders that are out there protecting this country. And a lot of those guys are predator hunters. I'm finding out. So just glad that I could have this visit with you, and God bless you, and God bless all of our listeners.
Yes, thank you very much. We'll talk to you everybody later. Thanks for listening.